Okay, now we can get going. So we're going to talk a little bit today about graffiti and the cultural geography of graffiti. This is something that's appropriate in our area because we live in Los Angeles, and we're lucky enough or not lucky enough to have lots of examples of graffiti all over town, right? You take the metro, you see graffiti. You're driving around town, you'll see graffiti. So the reason that this is interesting is because just from looking at graffiti and starting to look for patterns, you can tell a lot about cultural geography. Why is graffiti different in different areas? What is the graffiti trying to tell you, for example? Is it gang or non-gang related? What does that mean about an area? So it's something that once you tune your eye into, you start seeing all over, like, oh, that's not gang related. That is gang related. That's a roll call. That's, you know, so you can actually start learning a lot about an area, even if you didn't know anything else about it, just by taking a look at the graffiti. And some of you are more or less familiar with this. In other areas of the country, for example, when I taught in Wisconsin 3 years ago, one of my other professor's kids, we were talking about graffiti. He's like, "What's graffiti?" And I was like, "It's like, you know, when people like scribble stuff on the wall." I've never seen that. So in some places in the country, you know, especially maybe in a rural area, they may not have a lot of graffiti. But we do in this area, so it's particularly relevant, okay? Why are we talking about graffiti? You might think, oh, what does graffiti have to do with cultural geography? Well, some of the messages in graffiti are overtly cultural. Graffiti is in some ways, right, it's a way of communicating, okay, a very distinct way of communicating, so it has connections with language. Sometimes graffiti can be political in nature, okay? For example, messages to the police. We'll talk about that. Sometimes graffiti can reflect popular culture, right? It might be wheat paste of, you know, Andre the Giant, okay, which has to do reflecting pop culture as well. Sometimes you can read into different ethnic groups having wars, for example, whether it's like a norteño sureño thing going on, and you can read that right on the walls. So, believe it or not, graffiti has its arms in a whole lot of different of the main components of cultural geography, which is why we're taking a look at it today. Okay, so what do we mean when we're talking about graffiti? What is that? You know, essentially, the word graffiti comes from Latin to mean scribblings, okay? But some graffiti is pretty evolved. It's not just a scribbling someone's name, for example. It can be high art, right, in some circles. So when we're talking about graffiti, the most important part is it is unauthorized, okay? There are some instances where a business might commission a piece to be made by a graffiti artist, but then it's really not graffiti. It's art. It could be an inscription. It could be just a word. It could be a picture, a design. It doesn't have to just be put on by spray paint. That again is kind of a misnomer about graffiti. It can be etched, right? You see etchings into bus windows, for example, which is a felony if you go to etching versus just spray paint. Markings, they can use those daubers that you use for bingo, right? And they take the end out and put fresh paint inside. Paint, right? Wheat paste, for example. And so graffiti takes a lot of forms. It's not just, right, like a tag, for example. Many different forms can be graffiti. Okay, so where is it? Right, where graffiti can be is typically, it has to be accessible, right? And some places you don't think are accessible, like overpasses that have like no ladders up to them. You're like, how did they get up there? Right? I guess they find a way. So in order for graffiti to be in a space, it has to be accessible. It's very unlikely that a graffiti artist is going to rent a huge crane and take it out, and you know, that'd be too conspicuous. It also needs to be a place where people can be unobserved for a small amount of time. Maybe that just means it's along a busy street, but at a certain time of day, there's not a lot of traffic there. So they can be relatively unobserved for a portion of the time. You need a surface. You can't have graffiti unless you have a surface. And I've seen hiking up at Eaton Canyon, sometimes a rock or a tree can be a surface. It doesn't have to be a man-made surface, unfortunately. And it's place-specific, right? Which means that you need to have this substrate in a specific place that's unobserved. So there's only certain areas that have all these characteristics. You don't find graffiti everywhere, okay? Again, you know, why would someone tag something that would never be seen at any point in time? No one's going to like tag a rock and then flip it over and put that down on the earth, right? You want people to view what's going on, to view that information. So we know there's a geography to this. There's only specific spots that have all these categories. And why would a geographer care? You might think like, well, if you're in a tag crew, you might want to know about geography, or if you're in a gang or something, you might want to know about graffiti and the geography of it. But if you were a geographer, how would you study this? Well, you would have to take it from a scientific perspective. For example, you would do what's called a controlled assessment investigation. That's just a fancy way of collecting data on graffiti. And I'll give you an example of this when we do our walking tour. So how would you do that? You could take the metro all over downtown LA and count, for example, the number of separate tags that you see. Like, oh, Pony Boy has 187 tags, okay, for example. Or you might map out the total coverage of an area. So Pony Boy has 187 tags, and his area is right around Chinatown. We don't see it anywhere else but Chinatown. So his area is, let's say 2 square miles. Or you might gather data on the number of different artists, okay? The number of different taggers, for example, that you see, or monikers that you see written. Moniker is a name for someone's name or street name. Or you might take data about the quality of graffiti, right? Like, okay, I'm going to tally up all the graffiti that I see that's only using one color, right? Pretty simple graffiti. And then I'm going to tally up all the graffiti that I see where someone used shading and 2 colors. Okay, that's obviously going to tell you that street artist had more skill and probably had more time to spend, okay, to make that. And then you collect all this data and you're thinking like, okay, who cares? I have all this, like, these Excel spreadsheets with numbers. And well, then what you'd probably do is you'd show it in some way, right? You'd make some sort of a map or a graph. You could use a Google map or Google Earth, for example. You could map where the graffiti was found. You could maybe show some sort of density, like the dark spots are higher density of a certain tag versus lower density. And you might even take photographs along the way, and you can georeference those photos with where you found it. And we'll talk about who's doing that and why they'd want to do that. Now, when a lot of you think of graffiti, you might think about gangs. But 99% of graffiti is non-gang, which is really surprising, because it's sort of a stereotype that all graffiti is gang-related, but it's typically not. It's typically by tag crews who want notoriety. And there's a specific vocabulary in kind of the graffiti world. For example, a bomb isn't like a bomb, something you wouldn't want to talk about when you're in the TSA line, for example. It's when you're trying to paint or hit or mark as many times as you can in a specific area, right? Like you dropped a bomb of graffiti, right? You want to hit as many areas as you can. I mentioned before a tag crew. A tag crew isn't a gang. It's just a group of graffiti artists who maybe work together, maybe share resources. They want to get their name out as much as they can. It's an adrenaline thing. It's an adrenaline rush. There's an adrenaline rush when someone's actually tagging, because they're like afraid to get caught. And then there's an adrenaline rush when you see your name all over town and people are talking about you. A few other terms: a piece, right? If someone's referring to a specific type of street graffiti as a piece, that's short for a masterpiece. So it'd be a really, really involved mural, perhaps, with many, many colors, shading. You'd have to really be an artist to do a piece. Tags don't require much effort, right? Normally done in one color. You're just scribbling your name. We'll see some along our walking trip of Pasadena. Many graffiti artists have what's called a black book. So if you have a little notepad that you keep with you, where you like sketch a bunch of stuff and write your name a lot, you might be a tagger. Or if you have a friend who has a little book that he keeps all his sketches in, when police go to neighborhoods and try to educate parents about like, hey, your kid might be a tagger. You know, if there's tags written all over your kid's book bag, they might be a tagger. There's, you know, tags written all over their football, they might be a tagger, for example. Moniker is just the name, right? The tagger's name is another word for your handle or your name. Oh, and then slap tags. Slap tags are becoming really popular because it's easy to tag and evade police because you do all your tags at home. You get postal, those like free postal stickers, and then when you're in class, you sit in the back and you like tag, right? Yeah, and then you have them, and you like can run and slap them on a pole and then run away from the cops, right? So these are really popular, and I've seen these around campus as well, and I don't know, it's kind of a cop-out. Like, you're not going to stand there and actually do your art. You're going to like wuss out and slap a sticker on and run away, okay? But these are sort of all of some of the terms that we'll use and that you'll see when we talk about graffiti. And 99% of it is non-gang related. But how do you know, right? Well, there are certain signs and symbols that you'll see that tell you it's probably gang related. And this is helpful because you can gauge whether or not you're walking in a neighborhood and it's just like street art, no big deal, or you're walking in a neighborhood and you're like, oh, this is dangerous. Like, people want to kill each other. And oftentimes police, they can identify spikes in gang graffiti before there are killings or murders. So there is a correlation here. Okay. If there's graffiti and you see someone's name crossed out, that is likely to be gang related. Or there's a K in the name, that's also likely to be gang graffiti because it stands for killing them. So let's say you're a tagger and your name is Chaco, right? And another rival gang comes up and they're like, oh no, death to Chaco, man. Right? You'll cross that particular tag out. Or you'll do that and you'll write, right? Which means if you're Chaco, you better look out, right? Because someone's after you, right? And everybody knows what that means. That's like a big like, oh no, you didn't. I mean, that's so this is serious, right? This is serious stuff here. There's also numbers that you'll want to look at. You'll also look for these numbers on like tattoos. You know, if you see someone on the metro like huge tattoos or tattoos here. Right, 13, for example, is a number that's associated with the Southern California Chicano gang, right, the Sureños. They often use the color blue. So if you see a tag, right, that has in blue and has the number 13, it'll probably have, you know, some other name associated with it. And if it's in blue, right, that's more likely to be a gang-related tag. So, you know, it's telling you a little bit about the neighborhood you're living in. Now, L is the 13th letter of the alphabet. Yeah. Oh, for the Sureños? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M. You're right. Yeah, and they do. They're controlled by the Mexican mafia. And a lot of times, individuals on the street will have to pay taxes to the Mexican mafia. And taxes isn't like the IRS taxes, right? It's like cash that will then be funneled to the Mexican Mafia, which the leaders are mostly in jail. So if you see the letter M, because it's the 13th letter of the alphabet, and 13 is associated with the Sureños, that too will give you a clue that it's likely gang-related. The number one is very common in Crip and Blood graffiti. And quite frankly, the more intricate the graffiti is, the more tags that are in an area, the more an area is frequented. So again, the higher the density of graffiti, you can infer the more possible activity there is in the neighborhood. Go for it. Crips and Bloods, yeah. Obviously, spell check got to some of the slides and not others. If you see 187, what does that mean? Death to who? Cop killer, right? Okay. So if someone got arrested and they have a beef with the cops now, they'll just call it out, 187, and police officers, they look for this, right? That's calling out someone to perhaps commit murder on a police officer. So in Northern California, the Hispanic gang, the norteños, are more prevalent. They use the number 14 and will use the color red. So again, color, numbers, geographic areas, there's definitely a geography to some of this gang-related graffiti. Now, some of the gangs, these are just a few examples, you will use professional athlete teams, okay? And you know this if you went to like grammar school, like sometimes they ban certain colors. You can't wear red and blue to school, or you can't wear Oakland A's or whatever it is. Here's an example. The Crips, they tend to use the Houston Astros jerseys or sweatshirts. They've taken on that professional team logo as one that they identify with. The Insane Crips use the Cleveland Indians, for example. And there's many others that adopt a specific sports team, okay? So if you see, a bunch of individuals with a specific sports team, you need to think about the area. You need to think about those individuals, and are they just fans, or might they be involved in gang activity, perhaps? Also, I mentioned numbers. You'll see like 32nd Street or 64th Street, okay? A lot of times you'll see a tag, and then you'll see, that's showing allegiance to a specific area, a street that they live on. All right, so they'll identify with these numbered streets. So here's an example of something you might see, and what do you see here that gives you some clues that it's gang graffiti? Yeah, crossed out. So this guy, Nappy, who knows what his name is? He's gonna die, right? He's gonna double. Someone's gonna try to kill him. Okay, and so there's crossing out the C with a K. Now what that could mean is this could be Bloods. That if Bloods always cross out the C's in graffiti because they want to kill Crips. Okay. What else do you see here that might tell you it's gang related? 62 and 13. 13. But it's the west side of 62, not the south. P1. Maybe west side, but someone's not good with the S. 62nd, okay, that could refer to a street. So there's a lot of bad going on here, right? This is different from seeing just an isolated tag. So there's a lot of information that's gathered in here. And to the trained eye, for example, they can really read this and really get a wealth of information. And that's the whole point, right? To communicate territory, to communicate who needs to fall in line, perhaps. So one of one of the individuals who lives in our area, who's a world-renowned expert in graffiti, is Tim Kephart. He has a business called Graffiti Tracker, and I'll show you a short video which tells you about Graffiti Tracker. And what he's been able to do is he's studied graffiti all over the Southern California area, and he's able to put them into one of 5 types. Pretty much all graffiti that you'll see is one of 5 types. Number 1 is publicity, graffiti. And this is when a gang is promoted or promoting itself without the use of monikers, threats, territory, or sympathy, because then it would be in these other categories. Okay? Roll call. This is really popular. Roll call is when you'll see like 10 or 20 monikers all in a row, right? So it's, you have Snoopy, right, and Choco, and, I don't know, Happy, right, whatever. So they all, and then there might be like a date. They might say like, 2012, okay? And this is where all the individuals of either a tag crew or a gang are all joining together to write their names out as a way of kind of showing the rest of the world, this is our crew. Everyone here, we're all in the same crew, okay? Territorial is where a specific gang wants to say, this is our area, right? Maybe they'll put 13th Street, okay, in a specific area where they're not supposed to be, right? Some of the territorial markers that they use, grapes. There's a gang in Los Angeles called Grape Street, and so sometimes they draw grapes to show they're moving into a territory. But there's a gang who uses bunny faces. What gang is that? Anyone know what gang that is? Is it Lakewood? I don't. Someone uses bunnies. Who is it? Oh, it is Lakewood. Okay. So these are showing, symbols showing at their territory. They may want to grow their territory. They may want to just illustrate this is our street. Threatening graffiti would be something like, we're going to kill you, or cop killer, okay? Sympathetic, you'll see these as well. You'll see, Snoopy, R.I.P., right? That's this memorializing. If there's a fallen comrade, there's memorial graffiti, and we call that sympathetic. So let's give some examples here. Okay, what sort of types of graffiti do you see here? Do you see any roll call? Yeah? Right, we have Addison, Ronnie, something, Eggerson, partners in crime, okay? So these guys are probably all together. Right. Is it... So we have some sympathetic going on here, kind of a roll call going on here. We got some threatening, something department. So what police department? I don't know, DPD. I don't know what, Downey. Right, so kill the police department. Right here, threatening as well. Threatening as well. Do we have any territorial going on here? East Side, 33rd, right? Yeah, right. So there's a lot going on there, right? There's a lot of information there about where a gang is at, right? Who has been killed, who they want to kill, where they live. There's a lot of information here. So let's look at some more examples of graffiti here. There's some really great sites that will, map out graffiti in Los Angeles. So all of this looks familiar, right? This is Google Maps. Okay, you know how to make Google Maps. And what this shows is it categorizes out different types of graffiti. Here are the categorized markers here. Right, so you can click on any of these. You can say, oh, this is by the tracks in Alameda. This is an abandoned lot. Right, okay, and then you can view a photo of it. You might say, who would be interested in this? You oftentimes want, if you're a graffiti artist, you want to see what other people are doing, what's out there. This is very, very detailed, okay? So this, right, someone had to spend a lot of time doing that, right? Multiple colors, shading, outlining. So the more intricate the graffiti is, maybe the more secluded an area is, right? The more time they have to spend sitting there doing the art, for example. Here is another example of, these are maps of gangs in Los Angeles. And yeah, this is just an inset map talking about GIS, which we'll do in 2 weeks in this class. So you can take a look at aggressive graffiti in Los Angeles, okay? And there are maps which help to show the areas where aggressive graffiti tends to occur. Right, I think that's in Inglewood, Hawthorne, Compton, Culver City. And by looking at where areas of aggressive graffiti are and mapping those out, right, it can help give law enforcement a better idea of where crimes might be occurring, where they might be about to occur, for example. So there's a lot of good information that can come from knowing where graffiti is. Now, mapping graffiti has become really, really popular because it's so easy to do. This is a company called 594 Graffiti, okay? And what they do is they sell tracking to different cities, okay? And what they'll do is they'll help enable, let's say, Caltrans, for example, or local cities with the software, so they can bring out an iPad, they can bring out their iPhone, for example, take a picture, have a GPS coordinate before they clean something up. And that gives valuable information. So here is an RSS feed which shows live graffiti updates, okay? So less than a minute ago, there was a graffiti incident tracked in Anaheim, okay? Again, about a minute ago, there was an incident tracked in Hawthorne, okay? Florence, 3 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, again, Florence. Is that the same individual, right, on the same block, 4280, 4324? Possibly. 7 minutes ago, here, Olympic Boulevard, LA, 8 minutes ago, for example. So it's a way to get really timely information about when pieces or tags are going up, and then what to do with that. They try to collect information on vandals so that they can build a case and say, you know, you caused 47 incidents, that's going to cost you $10,000. Okay, so they can actually gather evidence against a specific individual. Taggers tend to tag near where they live. They tend to say what street they live on. They tend to say what gang they're with. So it's, you know, you might know what sort of maybe clothing or colors. So many times it's like little breadcrumbs, and so it makes it a lot easier to find individuals, okay, which helps identify them and helps law enforcement. Here's a brief story which talks about Tim Kephart's business called Graffiti Tracker and how geography is used to analyze the patterns of graffiti and why that's important.
So right here you're going to have more examples of graffiti underneath the bridge.
To the common citizen, it just looks like vandalism, but to the trained eye, there's a lot of code to be read into all of that graffiti.
Random gangs will put up their graffiti to challenge one another, promote their gang superiority or the others.
Deputy Zahid Sanchez is patrolling the streets of Imperial Beach, and it doesn't take him long to find another incident of graffiti.
So right here we have an incident of graffiti on this trash dumpster to this apartment complex. We actually have two types of graffiti, which, this one looks more or less to me like it could be more gang related, and this one is done by a tagger.
And just across the street, even more.
This looks like more like a tagging group. It's going to be either AMK or TBSK, that's the crew.
You'd think that with this amount of graffiti it's been building up over weeks, but in fact Imperial Beach has a very aggressive graffiti abatement program. 2 full-time public works employees are out every day during the week removing this stuff.
It's ongoing. It's two members, full-time, 80 hours every 2 weeks, remove graffiti and throughout the city. Sometimes they'll use stickers. They're local stickers to represent their crew, tagging crew. So what happened here is this crew ARD came out, crossed out this OBD, and put their name down there. So that's why I said when they see different things, that's why it's important to get it off before they see it, and then it's just a chain effect. And then this guy came down again, exit out, and then put OBD guy again. So that's the history there.
That chain reaction is one reason why it's important to get rid of graffiti or tags quickly, but it's also important to document it.
Restore it back to normal as best we can.
Since taggers use the same name whenever they tag, each individual leaves behind a trail of evidence that could be used if they're caught. But logging and categorizing every incident of graffiti is very time-consuming.
So right here we have an example of gang graffiti.
Enter Graffiti Tracker. It's a web-based service that allows public works staff to take police reports themselves.
So from here, instead of me having to come out or one of the patrol deputies having to respond, the city crew will get a phone call, they'll come take the photo, it gets uploaded, and it's categorized.
There's your tag right there.
At the next job, Tony shows us just how easy it is to file a report.
Every tag is photographed. The graffiti sign right there represents a 2x2 square, so that's how we can tell the square footage of the exact amount of graffiti that's out there. And he'll take the picture with the camera, the GPS camera, which marks latitude, longitude. So what that does is saves the deputies from coming out and taking a police report, tying up their time. All we do is take a picture and upload the Graffiti Tracker program, and that counts as a police report.
The reason it's so important to document it this way is simple: restitution. When a tagger is caught, he or she is financially responsible for damages related to their graffiti.
An average tag like this would probably run in the range of like $200 to $300.
And that can add up. To see just how much, back at the office, Deputy Sanchez shows us the work of a notorious tagger in Imperial Beach.
We arrested somebody in the act who was tagging, first one here, Slow. Okay, that's the moniker they use. Sometimes they don't realize how much graffiti they've done. Sometimes they're high, sometimes they're drunk, depressed, or what have you. I know this particular tagger was very surprised he didn't realize he'd done 217 incidents. So through the Youth Graffiti Tracker, I was able to bring all these cases forward, do a profile on how much money was spent, and put the case together, present it to the district attorney, and it actually just was adjudicated, and the city received restitution in the amount of $87,000 or over $87,000.
So it's pretty amazing that you can take all these bits of disparate data, right? There's a tag here, a tag there, just by taking a photograph. Right, most of your camera phones probably have a GPS enabler in that, right? Just by taking a photograph of that, uploading it to this program, it will map it, give you a timeline, the date, the time, the individual. You can look at patterns across time. You can look at patterns across space. And it's all geography, right? They're using geography to solve these problems and look for patterns in a real world kind of way.
Was the first to implement the program, followed by Oceanside, and then the San Diego County Sheriff's Department signed a contract about 18 months ago and brought along the 9 contract cities that the Sheriff Department provides police services to. So we have 11 of the 18 cities in the county, plus the county's unincorporated area, covered under this graffiti tracker program.
You know, every week we're arresting somebody who's doing graffiti, and Graffiti Tracker's been invaluable in that.
It's the hub.
Back at his office, Tony is uploading the day's photos to Graffiti Tracker, where they'll be analysed and categorised for use in future prosecutions. Then he pulls out the proof that the program is really working.
We'll receive restitution payments from the individuals that were caught. Some are going to be 500, and they just keep coming in.
More checks and less graffiti removal. A winning combination for Tony and his crew, and a formula that allows more focus on other crimes for sheriffs such as Deputy Sanchez.
So one of the other things that this piece mentioned, which was powerful, is kind of the cycle, right? If there is an initial tag and that's left up, well, that oftentimes will beget other tags, right? If you see something that's there, it creates a cycle of another tagger crossing that out, putting their name out for notoriety. If the initial tagger sees that their tag was crossed off, right, that could lead to violence. They might just come back, cross out the new moniker, put their own back. So you can see how you can just start with one little thing. You might see something on your street corner, perhaps, and you're like, whatever, it's no big deal. But one can easily lead to 10, right, to 20. And so that removal very quickly is actually quite important, okay? So Graffiti Tracker is one of those businesses, along with 594 Graffiti, which are trying to provide mapping services to police departments so that they can make sense of all the data, right? Again, just using geography to solve this cultural issue. Comments, concerns, or questions about our graffiti lecture?